on the preliminary studies, what you guys have done. So it gets, definitely gets a little bit trickier. Let's look at preliminary studies. And again, we're going to start with the directions. And the directions state, give us your pertinent preliminary studies, and this should be, and this literally is verbatim from the NIH website, and this should be a big plus for many people here, because part of that bulleted item says, include preliminary experience with and outreach to proposed racial and ethnic group members, and again, because many of you are looking at populations that are considered underrepresented and that don't have much competition from other areas, let's say from the mainland, that's going to give you a huge advantage, so you really want to use that and use that wisely. Preliminary studies also asks for publications and any submitted or accepted manuscripts, and then I added one bullet here, and I want to be very clear here because this is not part of the directions, but it used to be part of the directions, and I still think this is a very, very useful tactic. It used to be, oh gosh, I want to say the directions were changed, I don't know, a year or two ago, I don't remember exactly, but it was relatively recently. It used to say overtly in the directions to preliminary studies, include other information to establish your experience or competence. So in other words, sometimes we don't have exactly relevant experience. Let's say we're looking at cardiac problems in pregnant women. Well, let's say we're new to that field, we haven't really looked at the cardiac problems in pregnant women, but you know what? We did this other study on pregnant women, which shows our ability to accrue participants from this very high-risk, difficult patient population to, I would imagine, to accrue in a clinical study. You know what? We did this study, that shows our ability to do it. We did another study showing such and such, which shows that we can not only accrue these patients, but keep them in for the duration of the pregnancy and even several months postpartum. So the point I'm making to you here is don't make this so narrow that you damage yourselves. Talk to your reviewers. Don't just include something and not explain how it shows your ability to carry out the proposed research, because the whole point of this section is included for really one reason. And that is, when your reviewers look at this section, they want to know that if they give money to you and not to one of those other people who, again, very deserving population looking for money for research right now, many more deserving grants than are funded. What your reviewers want to know is, if they make this decision to fund you, do you have the training, the background, the preliminary studies, the experience, the competence to carry out this research successfully? So think of the preliminary studies as your opportunity to showcase, to identify what you have done that will help your reviewers to feel confident that if they give you the money, you'll carry out the studies. I don't mean that you'll carry out the studies and that they're going to turn out exactly the way that you think they will. Nobody really knows. I mean, that's it's science. They're not looking for you to say, we're going to do this and it's going to turn out this way. You have a sense of how it's going to turn out, but what they're looking for is that you have enough background, training, experience, publications, whatever it may be, that no matter what direction your research goes in, that you have the background, training, data to show that there is reason to believe you will be successful as you carry out this work. Now, when I say that you carry out this work, you want to start thinking broadly. It isn't just you, one person. When I say you, I mean your research team. And your research team can enormously strengthen the application of any investigator. And again, different people's perspectives are going to be different on this issue. To my mind, it is increasingly difficult for me to believe that in the future we're going to see any grants that are really submitted by one person. Grants are so multidisciplinary now, they're more complex. I think we're going to see grants teams. For those of you looking at a K award, your team will be your mentor of mentors. And I would even go so far as to say in this multidisciplinary world, if you're going in for a K award, I would think broadly. I think one mentor is the requirement. It's a multidisciplinary world. I would have 2 to 3 mentors, truly, if I were communicating. So, the last item in terms of the NIH directions, and it's the scariest, this could be the scariest line in the entire application, and it reads, recommended length 6 to 8 pages. And we say, 6 to 8 pages for preliminary studies, 6 to 8 pages, you've got to be kidding. It's very, very scary. So here's what I want to tell you about the 6 to 8 pages. First of all, as a new investigator, unless you are the exception that proves the proverbial rule, very few new investigators have 6 to 8 pages. It's just not possible. I mean, by definition, if you're a new investigator, how would you have 6 to 8 pages? It just, obviously, it's a disconnect. So let's talk about what's really needed. And here I really want to talk to you about the role of new investigators and preliminary data. This is huge for me. Remember yesterday, I was talking to you about the fact that the NIH definitely is interested in funding more new investigators. And when we say new investigators, it's not a chronologic term. New investigator means that you have not yet attained an independent research grant from the NIH. You can have been a member of a team of investigators, but you weren't the principal investigator who submitted that grant. So you're a new investigator. Well, I said the NIH is committed to it. How do they show that commitment? How do they show the love for new investigators, right? Let's talk about it. First of all, if we're looking in the R01, even as a new investigator, this is the most competitive of all applications. You still do need substantial preliminary data, and I would say a minimum of one relevant publication to what it is you're proposing to do. This is the most competitive application. However, at this time, the NIH has amended its review criteria and will continue to do so in the future. When the NIH looks at a new investigator, they're not just comparing you to a seasoned full professor with a track record of getting NIH funding. They're not just looking at the number of publications and doing a head-on comparison, new investigator, full professor. They're saying, as they look at your preliminary data section, not just what you've done, not just the amount of preliminary data, but they're looking at feasibility. Have you demonstrated not just that you've conducted a certain number of relevant studies, but have you demonstrated that your approach makes sense? That if you're looking at carrying out, if you're looking at developing a questionnaire for a certain population, have you done a focus group? Well, gee, that's beginning to show feasibility. Feasibility is what you will be evaluated upon. Potential, not just your track record, you're a new investigator. What's your potential? How do we assess potential? Your training, your publications, the research you've conducted before, so potential. A big one, evidence of institutional support. The word institutional support, or words institutional support, so again, almost like a code word, it means space and time. Has your institution allocated the space you would need to carry out this research? And are they giving you protected time? So in other words, let me give this flesh and blood, it makes it a little bit easier. Let's say you're coming in on a grant and that you can only devote 5% time to this grant because your mentor, chairman, whoever it is, says, you know what, you're a clinician. We make lots of money when you go see these patients, and we need you to keep doing that. But you know what, you're a great guy, I'll give you 5% protected time. That's going to be weak for institutional commitment, right? Because we want to go into a grant. If you're the PI, I think it is going to, I think it looks odd. I think it looks like lack of institutional commitment if you come in with less than, again, I'm pulling this out of, not out of thin air, but this is my interpretation. Different people, different interpretations. I think less than 20% effort, that really is the minimum that a new PI can devote to a grant. I think it just looks like you're not taking it seriously. Less than that for the NIH grant. So I would try and make that the minimum. Can you have fewer publications? You not only can, but you almost certainly will. again,